This is Steve Young for the Co-Roundtable. In this little comment, I want to reflect a bit on ethics and morals on one side, the ideal good, and money, materialism, and capitalism on the other. Now, Jesus Christ is very famous for saying to the devil, when the devil proposed to him that he should just create a lot of bread to eat. Jesus said, "Man does not live by bread alone, but by every word of God." However, in the prayer that Jesus taught us to say, we can ask for our daily bread. So the question is, what is bread? If you expand that, bread being the material things, clothing, furniture, cars, internet, cell phones, money in the bank, whatever, there's a tension, obviously, between the materialism, wealth, property, and the Word of God. But on the other hand, I always find it important to point out that we do need bread. Materialism is good. So recently there was a little article, several articles I found in The Economist. One is in the United States, where we still are dealing with the heritage of slavery, of Africans who were brought here to be slaves, and then segregation, Jim Crow segregation, which was legally ended in 1964 with the Civil Rights Act. But then other forms of social, economic discrimination in terms of where people could live, who would hire them, quality of schools, et cetera, et cetera. And one of the factors is that for African Americans, jobs, earning money, the bread has been more difficult for them than for whites. However, in recent years, the jobless rates we're getting close between blacks and whites, and the 63% of black Americans are now deemed to be in work or searching for jobs, more than the 62% for white Americans. Now, this I can't see as a bad thing. On the other hand, what produced it? A growing economy, tight labor markets. Employers are looking for employees, and maybe under these circumstances, they're less concerned for how an employee might look or dress or something. So that means more people can be themselves and make money. Secondly, there was another article in Newsweek, which kind of struck me. It's about the cost of automobiles in the United States. And the point is that for various reasons, the prices of good new cars and even used cars are very high. The article says that only 28% of listings for new cars are currently priced below $20,000. The average price, apparently, for a car is $50,000. Now, how many Americans, where let's say the average, as I remember, the average family income for African Americans is something like $44,000 a year. For white Americans, it's something like $62,000 a year. Interest rates are now massive for car loans, 7%? You're going to borrow $40,000 to buy a really fancy, spiffy car on what kind of income? And so this is like a first for Americans, and it may explain why a lot of Americans are sort of upset with politics, and they tend to blame the incumbent president, Joe Biden. But if it's harder to buy a car, and that sort of came with the American dream, you're unhappy. So economics, materialism, the bread gets to the quality of life. And then there was, quite frankly, a very depressing article about providing housing for most of the countries in sub-Saharan Africa. Apparently, the number of units which are going to be needed by 2040, 70% of them will need to be built, but nobody's building houses. People build their own houses from scraps of lumber and this and that with no electricity, obviously no air conditioning, et cetera, et cetera. The economies and the governments of these countries have sort of, I would say, not gotten their act together to provide a good, a basic good, either through private markets or through a public entity, a housing corporation, or subsidies. So this leaves, I think, lots of people in Africa not very happy.